Echoes of silence. The monsoon rain drummed against the windows of the coffee shop when Vikram first saw her. Ananya stood by the counter, shaking droplets from her umbrella, a worn sketchbook tucked under her arm. Something in the careful way she moved, deliberate and self-contained, caught his attention more than her obvious beauty. "You're staring," his colleague Pradeep whispered, elbowing him playfully. "That's Rohan's friend from art school." Vikram hadn't planned on meeting anyone that day. At 32, he'd grown comfortable with his routines, coding until dawn, weekend hikes, and the occasional family dinner where his mother reminded him that eligible bachelors didn't stay eligible forever. But when Ananya settled at their table, her voice soft as she introduced herself, something shifted in his carefully ordered world. "You design virtual reality experiences?" she asked, genuine interest warming her dark eyes. "I've been exploring immersive art installations. Maybe we're not so different." Their first date wasn't meant to be a date at all. Just coffee after a gallery opening where her charcoal landscapes hung like windows into another world. One coffee became dinner. Dinner became a walk along the river despite the late hour. Vikram found himself telling her things he rarely shared, about growing up between two cultures, about his father's death, about his belief that relationships needed foundations deeper than physical attraction. "That's refreshing," she said, looking away. "Most men aren't so patient." As weeks became months, Vikram noticed the boundaries Ananya maintained. She never invited him to her apartment. She changed the subject when childhood came up. Sometimes, her phone would ring and she'd step away, returning with a carefully composed expression. Yet in other ways, she gave herself completely, writing him poems on scraps of paper, remembering how he took his tea, listening to his dreams with unwavering attention. "Why haven't you asked about my past relationships?" she questioned one evening, 6 months in, as they sat on his balcony watching stars appear. "Because you'll tell me when you're ready," he answered simply. When he proposed 3 months later, a simple question asked while they planted marigolds in his mother's garden. Ananya's eyes filled with tears that seemed to hold more than just joy. "There are things you don't know about me," she whispered. "I know enough," he assured her. "I know who you are now." They agreed to a traditional approach to their engagement, no physical intimacy until after marriage. Vikram had suggested it, out of respect for his more traditional family, but Ananya's relief was palpable. It confirmed his suspicion that whatever shadows darkened her past, they were connected to touch and trust. Their wedding preparations became a dance of joining lives while maintaining certain spaces. Ananya designed her own wedding outfit, a contemporary lehenga in midnight blue rather than traditional red. She introduced Vikram to her best friend Divya, who watched them with protective eyes. His family embraced her despite her vague explanations about her estranged parents. The night before their wedding, Ananya called him past midnight. "Are you sure?" Her voice trembled. "Are you sure about me?" "More sure than I've been about anything," Vikram replied, wishing he could reach through the phone and steady her shaking hands. "Tomorrow is just a ceremony. We've already chosen each other." But as their wedding day dawned crisp and bright, Vikram couldn't shake the feeling that something significant remained unsaid between them. Some truth that would either break them or bind them more deeply than any ritual possibly could. Shadows on the wall, the wedding venue glowed with hundreds of marigold garlands and twinkling lights, transforming the garden into something from a forgotten fairy tale. Guests commented on the unusual touches that made the ceremony uniquely theirs. The poetry readings instead of traditional mantras, the bride's midnight blue attire contrasting with the groom's ivory sherwani, the absence of certain family members conspicuous only to those who knew to look. Vikram watched Ananya throughout the day with quiet wonder. She moved through the ceremonies with grace, her smile genuine yet somehow distant, as if part of her observed from elsewhere. Only he noticed how she flinched when relatives asked about children, how her fingers trembled during the final blessings, how her eyes sought out Divya's for reassurance when the priest spoke of wifely duties. "She's carrying something heavy," his mother whispered, as they watched Ananya receive congratulations. "Be gentle with her, Beta." "I always am," Vikram replied, though uncertainty flickered through him for the first time. The celebration continued past midnight, but eventually, they escaped to the Heritage Hotel where they'd booked the honeymoon suite. The ancient stone walls and arched doorways created an atmosphere of timeless sanctuary as Vikram carried their overnight bag while Ananya walked beside him, increasingly quiet with each step. Inside the suite, dim lighting cast long shadows across intricately carved furniture and silk-draped walls. Rose petals formed a path to the four-poster bed, champagne chilled in a silver bucket. Everything arranged for romance, for beginnings, for the crossing of thresholds. Ananya stood by the window, her reflection fragmenting in the leaded glass. She'd changed from her wedding clothes into a simple nightdress, her hair loose down her back, her mehendi-decorated hands clasped tightly before her. "Would you like some champagne?" Vikram asked, loosening the embroidered collar of his kurta, suddenly unsure of himself despite months of anticipation. "Vikram," she said, his name coming out like a confession, "I need to tell you something first." He sat on the edge of the bed, giving her space, sensing the magnitude of whatever was coming. "I'm listening." "The reason I've been careful. Why I wanted to wait." Her voice steadied as she turned to face him. It wasn't just tradition or religion. Slowly, painfully, her story emerged in fragments. At 21, fresh from university, she'd fallen for Rajiv, a charismatic arts patron 15 years her senior. What began as mentorship became control, isolating her from friends, criticizing her work, then claiming credit when it succeeded, monitoring her movements, her phone, her clothes. "He never hit me," she said, a bitter laugh escaping. "He was too sophisticated for that. His violence was architectural. He built walls around me until I couldn't remember who I was." The financial abuse came next. Joint accounts emptied, credit cards in her name maxed out, loans she supposedly agreed to. When she finally tried to leave, he threatened to destroy her reputation in the arts community, to release private images, to harm himself. Divya helped me escape, literally drove through the night to get me. I spent 3 months sleeping on her couch, jumping at shadows. Ananya's voice had gone flat, as if reading someone else's biography. "The debt took 4 years to clear. The nightmares still haven't stopped completely." Vikram remained still, afraid any movement might shatter this fragile moment of truth. "I've had years of therapy. I've rebuilt my career, my sense of self. I'm not damaged goods, Vikram." Her chin lifted defiantly. "But I need you to understand why trust is difficult for me, why intimacy isn't simple, why I sometimes get quiet when you reach for my hand too suddenly." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything she'd revealed and everything he'd yet to say. Outside, distant fireworks from another wedding celebration briefly illuminated the room, painting their faces in flashes of gold and crimson. "If you want to annul—" she began. "No." The word came firmly, immediately. Vikram stood but didn't approach her. "Ananya, may I come closer?" She nodded, tears finally spilling over. He moved slowly, deliberately, until he stood before her. Close, enough to share breath but not touching. What he did was unforgivable. "But it doesn't change who you are to me." "And who am I to you?" she whispered. "The woman who sees beauty in broken things, who codes messages into her artwork that only the attentive discover, who brings me tea when I'm working late without being asked, who argues passionately about ethics in technology and cries at documentaries about elephants." He smiled softly. The woman I choose today, just as I chose yesterday, just as I'll choose tomorrow. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. I wanted to tell you before, but I was afraid. You told me when you could. That's all that matters. Vikram opened his arms, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, Ananya stepped into his embrace, her tears dampening his shirt, her body gradually releasing its rigid tension as the night deepened around them. The weight of words' morning light filtered through ancient stained glass, casting kaleidoscope patterns across the rumpled bedding where they'd finally fallen asleep, fully clothed and emotionally exhausted. Ananya woke first, momentarily disoriented, until memory flooded back, her confession, his acceptance, the strange weightlessness that followed unburdening herself after so long. Vikram slept beside her, one protective arm draped across the space between them, not holding her, but ready to if needed. She studied his face, the slight furrow between his brows even in sleep, the stubble darkening his jaw, the mouth that had spoken such gentle words when anger or disappointment would have been easier. When his eyes opened, finding hers immediately, she expected awkwardness. Instead, he smiled sleepily. "Good morning, wife." Something in his deliberate normalcy brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Good morning, husband." They spent their first day as a married couple in a strange liminal space, legally, socially bound, yet rediscovering each other through the lens of new understanding. They ordered room service rather than facing the knowing looks of other guests. They spoke for hours, filling in the details of her past that had been too painful to articulate the night before. "What helped you heal?" Vikram asked as they sat, cross-legged on the balcony, sharing a late breakfast. "Art, at first. I couldn't speak about what happened, but I could paint it, create exterior representations of internal wounds." Her fingers traced patterns in spilled salt on the table. "Then community. Finding others with similar experiences, realizing I wasn't alone or uniquely vulnerable." "And now?" he asked carefully. "Now, it's about reclaiming parts of myself I surrendered." She met his eyes directly, including physical intimacy. "But I need patience with that. There are triggers I don't always anticipate." Vikram reached across the table, palm up. After a moment, she placed her hand in his, a small gesture that represented so much more. "We have time," he said simply. They extended their stay at the hotel for 3 more days, postponing their planned honeymoon to Bali. Each day established new patterns between them. Ananya found herself telling stories she'd suppressed for years, not just of trauma, but of childhood joys, teenage rebellions, college adventures. Vikram listened, occasionally asking questions, but mostly giving her the precious gift of being heard. In the evenings, they pushed against boundaries carefully, a prolonged embrace, his lips against her forehead, her fingers tracing the contours of his face. Each touch requested, each granted or gently declined, building a physical vocabulary based on consent and communication. On their last night at the hotel, she asked him something that had been nagging at her. "Why weren't you angry?" Most men would feel deceived. Vikram considered this seriously. "I was angry, but not at you. At him. At a world that makes survivors feel responsible for their own abuse." He paused. "And maybe at myself for not creating enough safety sooner for you to share this." "You always created safety," she countered. "I just wasn't ready to step into it." When they finally returned to Vikram's apartment, now their shared home, reality reasserted itself. Wedding gifts needed unwrapping. Thank you notes awaited writing. Family members called for updates on their honeymoon. Vikram returned to work while Ananya set up a studio space in the spare bedroom, yet something fundamental had shifted between them. The weight of her unspoken truth, carried for so long, had transformed into a different weight. that of mutual knowledge, of secrets shared and accepted, of vulnerability rewarded with compassion rather than exploitation. One evening, 2 weeks after their wedding, Vikram returned home to find Ananya in her studio working on a new series. Unlike her usual landscapes, these canvases explored the human form, fragmented, healing, becoming whole. "They're beautiful," he said, standing in the doorway to avoid invading her creative space. She looked up, brush still poised. "They're us," she said, "or becoming us." That night, she was the one who reached for him in the darkness. Healing waters. The Balinese villa overlooked a private stretch of beach, waves creating a constant, soothing soundtrack as they finally began their proper honeymoon 3 months after their wedding. Mosquito netting draped around the four-poster bed. Ceiling fans stirred the humid air, and everywhere orchids bloomed in riotous defiance of order. "It feels like another world," Ananya said, unpacking her sketchbooks and arranged them meticulously on the writing desk. Some habits of control, developed during recovery, remained comforting rather than restrictive. "That's rather the point," Vikram replied, already changed into swimming shorts. 3 weeks of just us. No deadlines, no families, no expectations. The journey toward physical intimacy had progressed gradually since that first night of revelations. There had been setbacks, moments when an innocent touch triggered painful memories, nights when Ananya woke gasping from nightmares she couldn't articulate, days when shame resurged without warning, and she withdrew into herself. But there had also been breakthroughs. The first time she initiated a kiss, the evening she allowed him to see the faded scars on her wrists from her darkest days, the afternoon they showered together, nothing sexual about it, just the simple vulnerability of nakedness without performance. Their first night in Bali, they swam in the private pool under stars that seemed impossibly bright and close. The water held them, buoyant and equal. "I want to try," she said, her voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of water against tile. He moved closer, water rippling between them. "Try what?" "Everything." Her eyes reflected starlight. "I'm ready, or as ready as I'll ever be." Vikram touched her cheek, droplets clinging to his fingertips. "We can stop any time. You know that, right?" She nodded, then surprised him by laughing suddenly. "We sound like teenagers." "Maybe that's not wrong," he suggested. "Maybe we're rediscovering something that should be approached with that kind of newness." Later, wrapped in plush robes on the veranda, Ananya told him about the specific therapeutic approaches that had helped her reclaim her relationship with her body. "Somatic experiencing," she explained, "reconnecting with physical sensations without judgment, distinguishing between past threats and present safety." "Teach me," Vikram said, not just in anticipation of their intimacy, but out of genuine desire to understand her journey. That night became another first for them. Clumsy, at moments, tender at others, with pauses for reassurance and unexpected laughter. Not perfect, but perfectly theirs. Afterward, Ananya cried, not from distress, but release. "It's like reclaiming something that was stolen," she whispered against his chest. During their weeks in Bali, they established rituals that honored her healing journey. Mornings began with yoga on the beach, learning to inhabit their bodies with intention rather than anxiety. Afternoons found them exploring local temples and art markets, gathering inspirations and talismans. Evenings were for storytelling, Vikram finally sharing his own vulnerabilities, the childhood bullying that had made him retreat into code and computation, his brief engagement years ago that ended when he discovered his fiancée's infidelity. "We're both a little broken," he admitted one night as they lay tangled together, "just in different ways." "I prefer repaired," Ananya suggested, "like kintsugi, more beautiful for having been broken and mended." They returned home sun-bronzed and fundamentally changed, not just as individuals but as a partnership. Ananya began working on commissioned pieces again, her new style incorporating elements of her personal journey without explicitly revealing it. Vikram's coding projects increasingly focused on creating safe digital spaces for vulnerable communities. One evening, as summer faded toward autumn, Ananya received an email from a small gallery specializing in artists exploring trauma and recovery. They wanted to feature her work in an upcoming exhibition called Reclamation. "They want me to give a talk," she said, voice tight with anxiety, "about the personal experiences behind the art." Vikram sat beside her, reading the invitation over her shoulder. "Are you ready for that?" She was silent for a long moment. "I think I need to be. Not just for me anymore." Constellations of Hope 1. Year after their wedding, Ananya stood before a crowded gallery, her newest installation, Cartography of Healing, illuminated behind her. The piece combined traditional charcoal landscapes with digital elements viewers could interact with, revealing hidden layers and perspectives with each touch. "Art saved me when words failed," she began, voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "But community sustained me when art alone wasn't enough." In the front row, Vikram watched his wife with undisguised pride. Beside him sat Divya, who had become a regular presence in their lives, and Dr. Sharma, the therapist who had guided Ananya through her darkest times and now collaborated with her on workshops for other survivors. The exhibition had drawn unexpected attention. Local news coverage, social media buzz, and most significantly, messages from others who recognized their own journeys in Ananya's work. What had begun as personal catharsis was evolving into something larger. "Healing isn't linear," Ananya continued, gesturing to the spiraling elements in her installation. "It's cyclical. We revisit old wounds with new understanding. We integrate past pain into present strength. We transform private suffering into collective resilience." After the formal presentation came the reception. Vikram stayed close but not hovering, attuned to the subtle signs that indicated when Ananya needed space or support. They had developed an almost telepathic awareness of each other's states, not because of some mystical connection, but through deliberate, consistent attention. "Your wife is extraordinary," commented a gallery patron, swirling champagne thoughtfully. "She is," Vikram agreed, "but not because of what she survived, because of what she's created from it." Later that night, walking home along the riverfront rather than taking a taxi, Ananya told Vikram about the young woman who had approached her privately after the talk. "She's still in it. The relationship she knows is abusive but can't figure out how to leave. She asked if she could email me." "What did you say?" "That I'm not a counselor, but I know people who are. That leaving is rarely a single moment, but a series of small decisions towards self-preservation." Ananya's grip on his hand tightened. "That she's stronger than she believes." They stopped on the bridge, watching the moon's reflection shimmer on the dark water below. Their first year of marriage had brought challenges beyond Ananya's recovery. Vikram's mother's health scare, professional setbacks, the ordinary frictions of two independent people learning to share space and time. But the foundation they'd built through radical honesty supported them through each trial. "I've been thinking," Ananya said, turning to face him, "about what comes next." Vikram waited, giving her the space to find her words as he always did. "I want to try for a child." She rushed ahead before he could respond. "Not immediately, maybe in another year. But I've been working through my fears about parenthood with Dr. Sharma, and I believe, I can break the cycles that damaged me. With you." Joy surged through Vikram, not just at the prospect of parenthood, but at the distance Ananya had traveled to even consider it. A year ago, she could barely imagine a future beyond surviving each day. "A year from now sounds perfect," he said, drawing her into an embrace. That gives us time to enjoy being just us a little longer. They continued their walk home, planning and dreaming aloud. Ananya's upcoming artist residency in Japan. Vikram's ideas for ethically designed virtual reality experiences for trauma survivors. The spare room that might eventually become a nursery, but would first host Divya during her 3-month visit. At their apartment, strings of fairy lights illuminated their small balcony garden, Ananya's influence transforming Vikram's formerly Spartan space into something whimsical and alive. They settled onto the cushioned bench, shoulders touching, watching the city lights below. "Do you ever regret waiting?" Ananya asked suddenly. "For the physical part of our relationship, I mean. We lost months because of my past." Vikram considered the question seriously. "We didn't lose anything," he finally said. "We gained understanding first. Everything else followed in its own time." Above them, stars emerged from behind passing clouds, ancient, light traveling unimaginable distances to reach them. Ananya leaned her head against Vikram's shoulder, her body relaxed and present in a way that still felt miraculous to both of them. "When I was in the worst of it, with Rajiv, I used to look at the stars and remind myself that perspective matters," she murmured. "That what felt all-consuming and inescapable was actually just one small temporary darkness in an otherwise vast and luminous universe." "And now?" Vikram asked, his arm circling her waist. "Now I know the darkness taught me to recognize light." She turned to him, the woman who had once carefully hidden her truths, now open-faced and certain. "To create it when necessary, to become it when possible." Their kiss beneath the constellations was neither the first nor the last, simply one moment in a continuing story of truth discovered, accepted, and transformed into something that could, against all odds, illuminate the way forward not just for themselves but for others finding their way out of similar shadows.